Welcome to the third module in this mini course on community-engaged implementation science. Today, we'll be talking about how to identify and engage stakeholders. Our goals for this module are to explore which stakeholders to include, talk about the importance of giving back to stakeholders, and then end with some thoughts from community members who have been included on UF projects before. So first, let's talk about which stakeholders to include. It's important to start this process early, as building relationships can take time, especially in communities with existing mistrust or a history of helicopter research. This also gives you time to gain a greater understanding of the community, what their concerns are, and what research topics are important to them. So you should be open to feedback and changing ideas about interventions or methods. There are so many possible stakeholders you can include. The Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, PCORI, organizes them into the following 9 categories. First are patients, which include people who have experienced a disease, but also their family members or members of advocacy organizations representing them. Then there are clinicians across an array of professions and researchers like you. On the organization level, there are people in charge of purchasing health benefits, payers like insurers, and industry, which could include those designing or created medical devices. Then you also have to think of hospitals and health systems themselves, along with institutions that educate clinicians. Finally, there are also always policymakers. Not every group will be relevant to your project, but it's important to consider a wide range of potential stakeholders and also to include diverse stakeholders within groups that you do choose, so you're not just asking a single person to speak for everyone. To start actually finding specific stakeholders, it can be helpful to reach out to researchers or clinicians in your organization who have already developed relationships with the communities or stakeholders you're trying to reach. Existing advocacy groups or community-based organizations are also a great place to start. Finally, just showing up can be a meaningful way to build relationships, so attending community events, meetings, or celebrations can be helpful. While you can still be flexible and should adapt your ideas based on feedback, when starting conversations with people you'd like to contribute to your project, it's helpful to have a clear ask so people know what they would be expected to do and how you'd compensate them for their help. Now let's take a look at a scenario where a research team worked with a diverse group of stakeholders. We'll go over the question together, and then you'll pause and take a second to consider your answer. In a National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute-funded project, researchers in Guatemala are trying to develop an implementation plan for a large-scale, evidence-based blood pressure management program. What potential stakeholders should researchers include in this project? Pause and consider your answer. In this specific project, researchers ended up including patients, their family members, community members, healthcare providers, and Ministry of Health officials from each of the 5 districts in the city they planned on implementing the project in. Next, let's talk about how you can give back to stakeholders. It's important to plan on compensating stakeholders from the outset, which requires understanding institutional policies as well as state and federal regulations. And above all, it's important to have clear communication with stakeholders and consistent follow-through. Failing to compensate people in a timely manner is an easy way to break down all the trust you've been working to build. Compensation looks different depending on the level. For organizations, this can include having them in your grant budget so they can get funding as well. It can also include sharing findings from your research in a way they can use to change their own practice or when they apply for their own grants. Finally, you can offer expertise and capacity building on other projects beyond the original research project. For individuals, compensation can include cash or gift cards, reimbursement, and professional development opportunities like attendance at a conference, workshop, or course. Now let's take a look at a scenario where researchers ran into some challenges with compensation. We'll go over the question together, and then you'll pause and take a second to consider your answer. On a PCORI-funded project, several community partners were receiving public benefits with income eligibility requirements. They were concerned that cash payments would be viewed as additional income, disrupting their benefits. What are some alternative strategies researchers could use to make sure these partners were still able to participate? Pause and consider your answer. The researchers decided on a flexible approach, allowing community partners to let them know whether they'd want a traditional cash payment or whether they'd prefer gift cards, gifts, or professional development opportunities. Finally, let's touch on the perspectives of 2 community members who have participated in research projects at the University of Florida. Sarah Catalanado is the executive director at Suwannee River AHAC, an organization involved in tobacco cessation. In her experience, community-based organizations are often doing similar work to a new research project. So when they start research and then leave abruptly when it ends, it can disrupt relationships with clinicians and patients. She had a better experience with the recent project, Promote Up, stating that what was really different about the Promote Up study is they really wanted to get the buy-in and wanted to have the people who were already doing similar work to protect those already built relationships. They wanted to ensure that we were at the table. In another example, E. Stanley Richardson is a patient advocate who has supported many research projects at UF. As a Black man himself, he is very aware of the existing distrust in many Southern Black communities after centuries of mistreatment by researchers. One of the studies he worked on took a creative approach to building trust in communities. He said, "You want to also give something while you're there." So they do a community project, maybe clean up a cemetery, in the community that they want to engage. Also, they would come in by way of a trusted community member or organization. This ends our third module on identifying and engaging stakeholders. Our next module will touch on collaborative implementation planning.